In this video, I'm going to be reviewing the Askar V Modular Refractor Telescope. Zoltan at 365 Astronomy kindly offered to let me have a go with this telescope to see what I thought of it and to do a review. So I took a look online to see what it was about, and I was really interested in it because it's a rather unusual refractor in that it comes with two different primary lenses, and it comes with a flattener, a reducer and an extender. So it can actually deliver 6 different focal lengths. And I'm interested in that because I really like to try and frame my targets, use the whole of my sensor and frame my targets well right in the planning stage. And this kind of telescope really helps you to do that because you can choose which focal length to use. So I said yes, I have completely free rein to say what I think about this telescope, but I do have to send it back to Zoltan when I'm finished. And thanks to Zoltan for being patient. The clouds in the UK are not being very friendly this year. So thanks again for your patience, Zoltan. So I'm not an unboxing guy. I'm going to show you what's inside the box straight away. So the telescope comes in this very substantial carry case. It's got a carry handle, and it actually comes with shoulder straps and a couple of loops on the end there for the shoulder straps. And it's got a nice graphic on the side of it if you're into that kind of thing. And if we unzip it, we can see what's inside, and I'll show you more close up in just a second. So basically got the telescope, the reducer, flattener and extender. There's a block you can remove in case you want to fit an EAF focus controller. There's the 60mm primary, and you get this nice little air puffer for cleaning your lenses as well. Just to note that all these items come vacuum packed in plastic bags. They're all sealed. I've already taken them out and removed them from their bags. So let's have a closer look at what's inside here. Let's start with the telescope. We've got a Vixen dovetail, and you'll see underneath that we've got lots of mounting holes, so we can move the position of this L bracket on the Vixen dovetail forwards or backwards, either to help balance or, for example, to create space to carry a control computer or something, which is something I often do. That supports this saddle, and if we look on the other side, you can see that the saddle can be undone, so you can actually remove the telescope from the saddle. At the top of the saddle, we've got this accessory clamp, and that's just got a couple of grub screws. You can change the position of the grub screws to suit your purposes. And then the telescope itself, well, the first thing you notice about it is that it looks really nicely made. It's got a nice sort of gloss white hammerite type finish on the main optical tube, and then the various accessories are in a sort of nice matte grey sort of sheen type finish. Here we've got the 80mm primary fitted, and I'll take off the lens cover. If you don't take off the lens cover, the air struggles to get in when you extend the dew shield. The 80mm primary has a dew shield, whereas the 60mm one doesn't actually need a dew shield because it inherently has one. So there you can see the dew shield extending, and you can lock that off. We've got on this side, we've got a small dovetail clamp for another accessory. I've taken one of the grub screws out here, and I need to put it back in. We've also got the focus knob, which is here. There's a single knob at this end. You can see the draw tube extending as I turn that. This knob's got a little grub screw on it that you can remove so that you can fit an electronic autofocus motor if you wish to. On the other side, you've got this sort of dome-shaped cover which you can take off. It does come off a little too easily, that, and I have had it fall on the floor a few times because it, when the telescope moves, it gets to a certain rotational point and this just falls off. So it's not very satisfactory, that. I think I just wouldn't use it. I think I'd just take it off and leave it off personally. But underneath that, we have the dual, it's like a Crayford dual focus control with the coarse control here and then the fine control. So, but it all moves very nicely, it's all very smooth, all feels very nicely made indeed. Now if we look more closely, we can see on the top here that we've got a graticule for the focus position. So hopefully you can see this better now. We've got a millimeter scale on the graticule, so when we find out where our position is for focus, we can make a note of what position that was. And for example, if you're using the 60mm primary with the extender, then with your particular setup you might find you achieve focus at 43mm. You can make a note of that and then you'll be bang on the right place when you start the next time. So that's a nice feature. Now another really nice feature here is the manual rotator, and to rotate we undo the locking knob and we can rotate the back of the telescope, and it's a really nice smooth action actually. And we have a marker on here and a graticule in 1 degree increments, so we can rotate by a pretty accurate amount, which is really useful for astrophotographers. Now at the moment I have the visual back fitted, so if you're doing visual observing this is what you'll use, and that has both a 2" and a 1 1/4" clamp on it. So you can see here the 2" clamp. I don't know if you can see in there, but you've got one of those brass inserts that prevents these grub screws from digging a hole in your precious accessories. So that's a really nice feature. It's a proper ring clamp rather than just grub screws digging into your eyepiece. If you want to use 1 1/4" accessories, you fit this 2" to 1 1/4" adapter and undo this grub screw, and now you can take this out, and again we've got a nice ring clamp, so this grub screw can't dig into your 1 1/4" eyepieces. So really good features. Askar have really thought about it there. That's very nice. If you want to do astrophotography, clearly you need to unscrew this visual back like this and fit either the reducer, the extender or the flattener, depending on which focal length you're using, which combination of primary and rear cell you want to use. So let's have a go at fitting, for example, the flattener. So here's the flattener, and the flattener has to be set up correctly. It's got 2 configurations. In fact, all 3 rear cells have got 2 different positions depending on which primary you're using. This is currently set up for the 80mm, and I'll show you how you set them up in just a moment. But just to show you that it's a simple screwing in exercise to fit whichever rear cell you're using on the back here, ready for astrophotography. So now I'm going to show you how you configure these rear cells for the 2 different primaries. So hopefully you can see that there's an 80mm marker here. So this actually, the black part unscrews. I'm going to keep that still, I'm going to rotate the rest of it. So a few turns and it disengages, and then you can slide it, and then there's another thread that engages, and once you reach the end of that travel you'll see a 60 marker will appear. So when you use it with the 60mm primary, it needs to be in this configuration, and when you want to use it with the 80, you simply spin this, push it in and spin it again, and you are now configured for use with the 80mm. So it's really quite an ingenious setup, and that works the same with the extender. So here's the extender, and it works exactly the same way. We unscrew, pull, and then unscrew again, and we're now set up for the 60 primary. Screw it back in, press and screw again, and we're set up for the 80. And then finally for the reducer, it's currently set up for 80. Same process, unscrew, pull and unscrew, and we're now set up for 60mm primary, and then simply the reverse, and we're back set up for the 80mm primary. Okay, so I just want to show you a little bit about back focus. With all 3 rear cells you need to achieve 55mm of back focus, and on every rear cell we have the same arrangement. There's actually an M54 female to female piece first, which is 13.5mm long, but ignore that number because it's not part of the back focus distance. And there's then an M54 male to M48 male adapter that screws into that. Again, that's not part of the back focus distance. There's then this M48 cover, female cover, so I'll just remove. So you can see that here is an M48 male thread, and the back focus distance is measured from this smooth face here on the face of this adapter. So you've got to achieve as close as you can get to 55mm from there to your sensor. I actually was 2mm off, I was 2mm too large, but as you'll see, my results are actually very good. But if you want to get it spot on, then you'll need to use a slightly different setup to me. But what I used was an M48 spacer that was 11.5mm long, which is here. This is an EFW filter wheel and an ASI 2600 camera from ZWO. Yeah, I used an M48 spacer that was 11.5mm long, then another one that was 4mm long, should have really been 2mm long. Then I've got an M48 female to M54 male adapter, which is 2mm thick. Then I've got the filter wheel itself, which is 20mm thick. There's then an adapter between the filter wheel and the camera that adds another 2mm, and then I've got 17.5mm inside the camera. So I ended up with 57mm of back focus instead of 55, so I was a couple of millimeters over. There we go. That's what I used to acquire imagery. And you'll see that the stars in the corners are actually very good, even when you're 2mm out. I would say if you're 1mm out, there's really nothing to worry about, and you get away with 2mm. I wouldn't be more than 2mm out though, or you'll start to get a lot of coma in the corners on your stars. And the other thing to show you is the 60mm primary. And again, as I said before, comes with a nice lens cover. Now the 60 doesn't have the retractable dew shield because it doesn't need it, because actually the lens is so far set back it's effectively already a dew shield. It just doesn't need to move. I don't know if you can see that there. But there's no need for a sliding dew shield on that one. And just take off the cap at the back. So that's what the 60mm primary looks like. And for completeness, I'm also just going to show you what the 80mm primary looks like taken off the telescope. So here we go. So here's the 80mm. It's a screw-in thread to put on the telescope. This is with the dew shield extended, and retract it back. Okay, so that's the 80mm primary. So I've set up the Askar V on my HEQ5 mount. I've fitted a guide scope and guide camera on the top. I've got the 80mm objective lens with the flattener. I've got my EFW filter wheel and ASI 2600 camera with my back focus set to a couple of millimeters over what it should be. I've got a control computer clamped on the underside of the dovetail at the front there, and you can't see it at the moment, but I've also got a ZWO EAF focus motor controller on the other side, which I'll show you in just a second. I've already balanced this, and you can see that although I've needed to use both of the 5kg counterweights, they're right at the top of the counterweight bar, so we're not anywhere near the limit in terms of payload capacity with this mount. So I'm just going to now show you what's on the other side. So hopefully you can now see the EAF focus motor controller on the other side. So this is a rather elegant setup. I'm pleased with it. I haven't put on the dew heater bands or the cables, just so it's easier for you to see what's going on, but clearly they all need to go on there as well. So I'm going to just quickly show you a close-up of the ZWO EAF focus motor. So here's the EAF focus motor. Just one thing to check, and that is that you fit it to the correct end of the focuser. It must go on the opposite end to the dual focus knob position. So there's two focus knobs on one side, one on the other. It's the single one on its own that you need to take off, and that's where the coupler for the EAF needs to attach. If you try and fit it to the fine focus knob on the other side, it won't work properly, as I found out to my cost. So what I'm going to do now is wait for a clear night and then take this setup outside. I'm going to choose a target that's almost dead straight up, something like M51, and I'm going to gather some 60-second subs using each of the 6 different configurations of the telescope, and then we'll have a look at the data and see how good it is. So this is the V60 setup with the extender on it, which was the last one that I did, looking up at M51. To actually gather some data under the same conditions with all 6 configurations, so both primaries, and with each of them tried all 3 of the rear cells. So I've got the data here, so let's have a look. So firstly we'll start with the 80mm primary and the reducer. So they're all 60-second, single 60-second shots, camera cooled to -15. There was a bit of haze around, so there might be a little bit of background brightness due to a very thin cloud, but most of the frames are pretty good. So on first inspection, this looks very nice. Can't see any issues. The amount of vignetting is mild in the corners, but it's not severe at all. And if we look with the aberration inspector, we can see how good the stars are, particularly out in the corners. You can see they're really excellent in the centre, and to be honest, they're pretty good out in the corners as well. Top right corner and bottom left corner are virtually perfect. I'd say there's a little bit of aberration at the top left and bottom right corners, but it's really tiny, and I think it's probably down to the fact my back focus was 2mm too high, so I'm really not going to attribute that to the telescope at all. But really this is good quality data, so that's great. Let's look at the same thing with the flattener. So now we're at 495mm focal length, and again let's have a look with the aberration inspector, and again it's a similar story. We've got very nice tight stars, tiny bit of elongation, maybe the top right corner is slightly elongated, but it's very small, and again probably due to my back focus. Now let's have a look with the 80mm primary and the extender. So we're now at the longest focal length of the telescope at 600mm. Again, it's a nice looking sub, and this is what the aberration inspector shows. Very similar story, very nice tight stars virtually everywhere, maybe right in the corners there's some very slight elongation. I guess the top left corner is very slightly elongated there, but again it's good looking data. And now let's switch over to the 60mm primary with the reducer. So this is the widest field of view that this telescope can do. Remembering that I'm using the ASI 2600, so it's not a full frame camera. So you can see here at 270mm what we get, and you can see a little bit of that haze from the cloud that was around on this bright star here, but again that's not down to the telescope. Let's have a look with the aberration inspector. Again, generally very good. In the corners it is slightly off. Actually we have got some more visible deviation from ideal in the corners there, but it is by a pretty small amount. I imagine if you're using something like Blur Exterminator, it's going to completely fix that, and again may well be down to my back focus not being perfect. Let's have a look then with the flattener. So this is at 360mm focal length, and again it's a nice looking sub, and let's have a look with the aberration inspector. Looking pretty good actually. Maybe the top right hand corner I can see a little bit of misshaping in the stars, but it's really really very small amount. So that's nice looking data. And finally the 60mm primary with the extender. So here we're at 446mm of focal length, and here's the aberration inspector result. And this one really does look very good indeed. Very hard to see any deviation from nice round stars everywhere there. So overall, very impressed with the performance of this telescope in all configurations. I have to admit I was slightly nervous when I looked online. I thought, well, if you've got a flattener, the idea of a flattener is to give you a flat field so that you can get tight stars across the whole image. So if you're not using the flattener and you use a reducer or an extender, does that mean that it's not a flattened field? Does that mean that you're going to get really poor stars in the corner? Well, this data shows that that's not the case. Actually, it's a nice flat field in all of the configurations. So you really have got 6 different focal lengths to choose from, so you can frame your target nicely and just choose which setup to use. But do remember that you must change the configuration of the rear cell to match which of the primaries you're using, and it's really important to set your back focus. Try and get it as close to 55 as you can. Now, in the process of gathering that data, I did actually make some silly errors, and actually I want to share those with you because they're quite insightful. So the first one was that I accidentally set up for the 60mm primary with the flattener, but I had forgotten to change the flattener from the 80 configuration to the 60 configuration. So this is the image that I took. It looks sort of okay, but if you use the aberration inspector, you'll see that there is some very visible coma in the corners. So it just shows the importance of setting up your rear cell to match the primary that you're using. So that's interesting. And the other thing that I got wrong initially was I was measuring my back focus from the wrong place. And as a result, although I thought I had 55mm of back focus, I actually had 47. So I was 8mm too short on my back focus. This is the image that I got, and if you run the aberration inspector on that one, wow, now you can really see now the effect of having a poor back focus. You can see that in the middle it's really still fine, but in the corners it's really terrible. So that's actually quite educational. I always think that if you get something wrong, you learn more than if you get it right, and that was a nice example of that, so I just thought I'd share that with you. I thought I would also share this image with you, which is an LRGB image of the Horsehead and Flame Nebula, taken with the 80mm primary and the flattener. I think it's come out pretty nicely. So when Zoltan at 365 Astronomy brought my attention to this telescope and asked me if I wanted to do a review, I was a little skeptical. I looked it up. I haven't used any products from Askar before, but when it arrived I was really impressed by its build quality first and foremost, and then later became impressed also by a number of features. It's really well thought out as a product. Those little features like the graticule on the manual rotator, so that you can frame your target really easily with just a single correction to the rotation angle. I really like those features. It's a well thought out product, and it's a product that's going to last. It also has this attraction of having 6 different focal lengths, so that you can move on to targets that are a bit smaller in the sky or a bit larger in the sky and still frame them nicely with a single camera. So that's really nice as well. And the subs that I took show that you can get very nice tight sharp stars all the way out to the corner, at least of a sensor of the size of the 2600, in all the configurations. As I said, I wasn't too sure whether it was just going to be sharp stars with the flattener, but actually it's sharp stars with all the configurations. I should have worked a bit harder to get to the 55mm back focus, so apologies for that, but I think it was pretty impressive despite being 2mm out on that front. So now I have to pack this up and send it back to Zoltan. If you are going to buy one of these telescopes, I would really appreciate it if you would use the affiliate link in the description under the video. It helps the channel to grow, and it'll be a big thank you from me if you do that. It won't cost you a penny extra. Until next time, clear skies.